seconds left.
Evans for three. Got him all! Shot clock off, 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three. And a goal!
Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman, and he is my co-host, Neil Meyer. A little bit of a quiet period in the realm of Bearcats football and basketball here on the Believe Network as we kind of get into the thick of the off-season, portal winding down for both sports. Not a lot of action going on either front, and just kind of looking ahead, getting ready for the upcoming seasons. There was a confirmation of a new opponent on the Bearcats basketball schedule. We'll touch on that throughout the show today, and we will also start the show with Bearcats basketball. We'll get into the preview of the show and all that coming up after a message from Bet Online. It's your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats and more. Get all the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams from Bet Online, including the latest matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. And we have still some stuff to get to today on the docket when it comes to basketball and football. Basketball side of things, still one spot left in terms of scholarships available for Wes Miller's 2024-25 roster. Dylan Mitchell hopes dwindling further and further out of view each day that he does not pick Cincinnati. Noah Waterman, a potential new target, maybe. Had one of the assistant coaches follow him on social media in recent days. The, of course, late entry into the portal, BYU forward. And then we have the football side of things to get to. In just a few months' time, we're going to be out there at Camp Higher Ground. Not necessarily looking at football here, though, kind of the overarching sports landscape of Cincinnati athletics, but obviously a lot of football fans involved here, looking at the number of avid Big 12 sports fans that are out there. We have a new data recollection from our guy, Jim Fuller, I believe that's who it was, who came up with this. Jeff Fuller. Yeah, Jeff Fuller came up with this. The amount of avid college sports fans in the Big 12 per school. We'll look at that as well on the show. We'll close from there. But first, we'll take a quick break and then get into the basketball side of things right here on Bearcat Blitz. Basketball, Neil, as we bring you in here, my man, still one spot left. Looks like they have followed BYU forward Noah Waterman, although there's no confirmed interest there. That was just a note made on the Bearcat Bunch portal tracker, which is a great job by Bearcat Bunch to get all these things in one spot here. Waterman, strong offensive rebounder, strong shooter as the stretch for BYU last season, 6'11", 220 pounds. Waterman could be a decent option if they do end up making full interest into Waterman, but we won't dive deep into that until we get confirmation that they're fully on board. The most recent notable portal contact before that was Issa Muhammad, which we touched on earlier in the week on our last show. So check that out if you have not heard about Issa Muhammad just yet. But overall, Neil, quiet on the Western Front, nothing really happening. And Dylan Mitchell having re-sparked his connection with Auburn and his recruiting acumen with them from his time in the high school ranks. It's just feeling like that dream is slowly going by the wayside, and Cincinnati kind of shifting to other options, and options that are kind of dwindling in terms of guys that they had been in contact with and are still out there on the board. One in particular getting taken off the board in Langdon Hatton, the Bellarmine center, who we thought could be a nice option. He is heading to play for Mike Woodson in Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And I think that's a great thing, as you mentioned. Obviously, portal's starting to kind of dwindle down a little bit as they approach the the near end of May with the holiday weekends approaching next weekend. But you make a great point. I mean, obviously, they do reach out to a guy, Noah Waterman, who they are very familiar with from the playing.
Maybe we don't have confirmation about that.
Yeah, don't have confirmation.
They follow. There was a following on Instagram.
Yeah.
I think it wasn't a confirmed. Hey, we're going to offer you a scholarship.
Yeah. So there was a follow on social media. So there could be some potential interest there, and he fits what Cincinnati needs at that stretch 4 position. Although it is worth noting that he was a late transfer portal entry. So he did enter the portal after the portal had closed. So it's interesting that he did enter the portal right when he did. But, I mean, Russ, you're looking at the stats for Noah Waterman from this past season. 9.5 points per game, 5.5 rebounds, nearly an assist on 46% field goal shooting at 6'11", 220 pounds. I think looking down, Russ, I think he really fits what Cincinnati would try to do. And I feel like he would fit this system very well. But not only is he a very prolific scorer, he can also shoot the 3 ball a little bit too. And I saw that up close and personal in the Big 12 tournament. I know he had a great game versus UCF in the second round of the Big 12 championships out in Kansas City. So overall, it's pretty quiet with the Dylan Mitchell stuff as well. Russ, as you mentioned, sounds like he's reconnecting some stuff there at Auburn, but no decision has been made on what Dylan Mitchell's future will potentially look like. But right now, Russ, it's been very quiet on the basketball front. You still have the one open scholarship, and right now it's like, okay, what could happen here? We haven't heard really that much. And you talk about, I know last season it was kind of like this similar situation where they kind of waited and waited and waited, because I believe the last commit was Aziz Bandego, and that was around this time last season.
Yeah, I think it was this week last year. Committed.
Overall, it's kind of like they're taking the same approach like they did a season ago, and just kind of exploring their options, making sure this last scholarship goes to the right person, and they're going to go from there. But a big one, as you mentioned, Russ, was Langdon Hatton going to Indiana to rock the candy stripes down there with Mike Woodson in Bloomington. So that was something that we talked about on the show, but we didn't really expect Indiana to be in the mix as well as they were.
Yeah, Langdon Hatton swooped in, taken by Indiana. When nobody knows, we don't know what the exact kind of level of judgment in terms of how much he was leaning towards Indiana versus Cincinnati or other spots, but the Hoosiers get the job done there, and Cincinnati hoping to get the job done in a place where they got embarrassed 2 seasons ago, as we have confirmation yesterday, according to Made for March, of another non-conference game in the works and getting finalized between Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky. Neil, you and I thought we may never come back to was it Truist Arena? Is that what it's called? Truist Arena right there. They're going back, my man. Headed back to the site of the 50s nightmare, which Cincinnati's offense completely sputtered in the second half 2 years ago. I think they scored like 12 points total in the second half.
8 points in the second half, if I remember right. I think they went like 4 of 28 in the second half, I recall.
Really, really bad. And now they're heading back to Northern Kentucky on November 13th, Neil, in what is a non-conference schedule that so far looks like Morehead State at home on November 8th, Northern Kentucky on November 13th. That's a Wednesday game. At Villanova, December 3rd. Home for Xavier, December 14th. And then some unconfirmed dates at Georgia Tech, home against Howard, and the neutral site action against Dayton. That, Neil, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 non-conference games out of
11.
Probably 11. Yeah, 11 total games that they're going to have, because you have 2 extra Big 12 games this year with the added teams, bringing the league to 16 total. So only a couple more games to finalize. It seems like, Neil, correct me if you feel differently, but I would be shocked if another true road game is added to the schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be shocked too. Especially, I mean, we saw it last season, Russ, where 9 or 10 of the first 11 games were at home throughout non-conference play. The only true road game they had was Howard. So I wouldn't be surprised if Wes Miller takes a similar approach in terms of the final few games in the non-conference slate. But Russ, let's talk about that non-conference schedule a little bit. Georgia Tech's going to be a really good team. Villanova's going to be a top Big East team. I don't know if we would say top, but it's going to be a good matchup there in the Big East. Xavier will be another good matchup. There's 3 or 4 quad 1 opportunities sitting right there in the non-conference alone. And I mean, we've seen it and we've heard it all for the last few years, Russ, in terms of March Madness. The only way to get in is how you play the non-conference. And it seems like from what the schedule was last season to this year, Wes Miller and the staff know that they're ramping up the competition level in the non-conference slate, it seems.
Adding a little bit more beef to that schedule for sure. And I think just giving them a little bit more breathing room, a little bit more room for error, just being able to first, though, you got to get some of these top tier wins on the board. Like you can't, it's great to schedule these teams, Neil, but even if they would have scheduled 2 more quad 1 wins last year, opportunities in the non-con, you still have to get those quad 1 wins. You still have to get those opportunities done. And they didn't do that last year in the non-conference. They didn't start stacking those quad 1, quad 2 victories until way too late in the season. So you get a couple more potential opportunities at those quad 1, definitely at least quad 2s in terms of Georgia Tech. When we're talking about Georgia Tech and Xavier and Villanova, those should at least at the minimum be quad 2 games. And when you think about Xavier and where they're looking like in the major preseason way too early rankings, they're fitting into the top 25 and a lot of them I'm seeing. So that would be a quad 1 opportunity at home there on December 14th. So a lot, I wouldn't say a lot more, but a little bit more room for error, a little bit more opportunity at signature wins in this non-conference slate compared to last year's non-conference slate for the Cincinnati Bearcats. And just, I think a little bit less of a chance for critics to poke holes through this slate. It's more connected. It's a little bit more beefed up depth wise in terms of the caliber of opponents. So I like what we get from the Bearcats non-conference schedule in that sense. And who knows, they could add maybe another potential quad 1, quad 2 team in a home game. I would be shocked if they have a quad 2, quad 1 opportunity on the road. Any other additions in the non-conference, but who knows what they end up adding. Although I would expect, in my opinion, I think it's just buy games the rest of the way. Just get enough games on the schedule to fill out the non-conference, because you have enough tests on this schedule, in my opinion, Neil, and just get the games filled out. Get some teams that are solid in the mid-major level, similar to what Wes Miller's done in recent years of bringing in mid-major conference title contenders to fill out those bye games, and then fully get yourself ready for the Big 12 slate. I don't think they need to add necessarily any other tough games. It might just be adding heat on top of heat that you don't need, so to speak.
Yeah, no, and I'm right there with you. Obviously, with the addition of 2 more Big 12 games, obviously in the best conference in America, you're looking down and you're playing, 20 conference games now, Russ? I mean, there's not really much needed to add 1 or 2 more quad 1 opportunities there in the non-conference slate when you know you're going to have.
I mean, they might have 13 or 14 quad 1, quad 2 games in the conference schedule.
Literally, just sitting there in itself in the conference play. I mean, you're going to have your opportunities there. Obviously, I know we look back at last season, there was about 6 or 7 that were 1 or just a couple point losses, single digit losses. They turned just half of those around. I thought they would have been dancing this past season, but hey, that was year 1 in the Big 12. Now that Wes Miller has gone through it with this staff, make the transition to year 2. It's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on how they adjust from year 1 to year 2. So overall, I don't think they need to add another quad 1 opportunity here in the non-conference slate, if it's just me personally.
Basketball not needing to add any more games this season, but if Cincinnati as a school and as an athletics entity wants to keep pace in the Big 12, they got to add some fans. We'll get into that after this break on Bearcat Blitz. All righty, Neil, looking at the state of avid college sports fans housed in the Big 12. This was an interesting data set that I wanted to talk about from diehard Big 12 fan Jeff Fuller, and just his kind of assessment at the quote avid college sports fans per Big 12 school. And then they also had the national as well next to the name. And so when we break down all of the Big 12, Cincinnati sits at 15th out of 16 programs, 15 out of 16 schools, I should say, and overall fans. It's 500,000 roughly gauged fans in the entire kind of college sports landscape, just above Houston, who actually Houston's pacing way behind everybody else. They have almost 100,000 more fans than Houston projected. Houston at 63rd overall and Cincinnati 58th overall in the national rankings. The rankings overall go Texas Tech 794,000, BYU 781,000, Kansas 764,000, Colorado at number 4 746,000, Arizona State at number 5 734,000, Arizona tied with Arizona State at number 5 at 734,000, then Iowa State at 707,000, Oklahoma State at 686,000 fans, West Virginia at 683,000, UCF after that 633, Utah 626, Baylor 569, Kansas State 559, and then TCU just ahead of Cincinnati in fan rankings at 542,000. But Neil, there's a big drop off between TCU to Cincinnati and then Cincinnati to Houston. So that kind of, I think, puts into perspective where Cincinnati is sitting right now. And according to Jeff, he went through a few different metrics to come up with this. And when it came, and he broke it down by attendance, social media following and interactions, enrollment, faculty and staff, and alumni-based data as well. And actually the number one school in the country with the most fans nationally was Ohio State at 2.1 million fans. I think this is, you look at the raw numbers, Neil, and you see the raw ranking, 15th out of 16 schools, and you think, that's not good. This is really bad. This could be dire times. But to me, that just is kind of life as a mid-major school, life as a group of 5 school for the past 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years that you've been living in. And now, with the added exposure, with the Big 12 moniker on all of your uniforms, just with being a part of that entity, they have the chance to capitalize on this, on these extra eyeballs, this extra funding, this extra monetary access, and get more fans. But we know what the biggest thing to get more fans is. What is that, Neil?
Social media.
No, it's not. It's winning.
And
You got to win games. You got to win football games first and foremost, and you got to win basketball games as well. The basketball team starting to do that, and the basketball team a lot stronger of a national brand in my eyes than the football team right now. But the opportunity is there for Cincinnati football with the momentum that they have kind of let fall by the wayside a little bit coming off of the college football playoff compared to the last 2 seasons, but a chance to pick that back up and a chance to get closer to TCU a lot sooner as opposed to start drifting back towards Houston and falling off of the 500,000 fan bandwagon.
yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great thing we're talking about this, Russ, based on what Jeff Fuller did here to get these analytics and all that kind of stuff. But you talk about branding. Look at where Cincinnati was throughout the college football run. If they were a Nike or Jordan school throughout the college football playoff run, I think that number, Russ, would be significantly different.
Yeah,
and that's because you look across all major college sports right now. Under Armour's what, 5 schools now? And then they just lose another big powerhouse school. So they're dropping like flies. No one's really wearing Under Armour in terms of branding like that. It's a lot of Nike, a lot of Jordan. Adidas is still out there doing well. But overall, Russ, I mean, branding right now at Cincinnati, like it's at the highest point it's ever been in terms of making the move back to Jordan. I mean, I think we've talked about this a couple times on the show. It's like no matter where you go, you're seeing somebody in an old school Jordan jersey here at Cincinnati, no matter what. But it's very interesting. And I will say this, based on this list, Russ, I'll ask you, was there any school that stood out to you personally about where they were ranked at this list?
BYU and Texas Tech, that it was shocking to me. I like to see Texas Tech at 7, like leading the Big 12 in total fans. I was shocked. I thought Oklahoma State would be I thought Oklahoma State would be in the top 3 for sure. Kansas, not surprising at all, given the national branding of that fastball program and how dominant they've been over so many different decades. So that's not surprising. But Texas Tech really shocked me, man. That really shocked me that they are that high, considering they have they've obviously never been to the college football playoff. They haven't won the Big 12 in either sport. Have they ever, maybe the Michael Crabtree year in football, but I don't believe they've ever won a basketball conference tournament or regular season tournament. And just, it must be something to Lubbock, Texas, man. The people love it there. They love the vibe, the fan base, the alumni base must be really strong, and they get you there. And then BYU, a little surprised that they're in the top 3, but it is one of those schools, Neil, where it kind of feels like once you're in there, it like vibe and just like it's kind of like it just means more thing, and where it's just the way the Provo, Utah, the small town kind of.
Yeah, it definitely is one of those small town feels, Russ. Obviously, I'll say I was pretty surprised by BYU being second.
I kicked myself out of the studio right there, but yeah, like I was saying, I think it's surprising that those two schools are at the top right there, but it may be just a confluence of those small town vibes, that the amount of time and just decades of building up those fan bases. But then again, I mean, Cincinnati football and basketball have been around just as long as BYU football and basketball, for sure, if not for sure longer on the basketball side of things.
Yeah, no, I was surprised by BYU because you look down at the numbers, 781,000. And I mean, Russ, they have a great stadium with a view, but it's not like they're going out there just tailgating nonstop or anything like that. So they're
right.
diehard avid fans, as Jeff Fuller mentions. But I will say, seeing Iowa State right there in the middle of the pack does not surprise me based off of what their fan base did out in Kansas City for the Big 12 championship. And that was on the men's and the women's front, Russ. I mean, their fans were freaking electric. Like it felt like a true home game in an arena that held nearly 20,000 people. I mean, I think the Iowa State Kansas State game was sold out like close to like 18,000, Russ, and most of them were Iowa State and Kansas State fans, but it felt like Iowa State fans made the 3-hour drive from Ames and just absolutely took over that whole city. I mean, I'm not sure if you saw the video of the Iowa State fans during the women's aspect of things at Kansas City Live. Like, they took over Kansas City. So seeing Iowa State in the middle of that mix does not surprise me, but overall BYU definitely caught me by surprise. But I would say Arizona State's up there that caught me by surprise a little bit as well too, Russ.
Yeah, definitely not the top 5 in terms of estimated avid fans that I was expecting out of each Big 12 school, but love the data set, love the diving into the numbers by Jeff Fuller. Glad he was able to do this and give us some good off-season chatter to talk about. Cincinnati, they're not in a bad spot. I would say, Neil, they're not in a bad spot, but they're in a spot where you want to grow. They're trying to grow. You're making an effort to grow. And just like when you look at the lowest current Power 4 program is Northwestern, according to Jeff Fuller, and Cincinnati has double the fan base of Northwestern, 226,000 avid fans projected for Northwestern compared to 500,000 for Cincinnati, and Cincinnati well above some of the other Power 4's bottom programs. So I think there's a baseline for Cincinnati to grow for sure. We'll see if they can do that in the coming years. And the lowest avid fan of any current fan base of any power program was UL Monroe. 75,000 avid fans, only 75,000 fans from University of Louisiana Monroe. We'll see if they can grow along with the Bearcats in the coming years. College football and college sports continually growing. College football, the number 2 sport in America, for a reason. People can't get enough of it. We'll give you more insight into it over the coming months on Bearcat Blitz. This has been Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Heltman. He's my co-host, Neil Meyer. We'll talk to you all next week.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a 3.